Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Wolfram Student Podcast. I'm Sam,
And I'm Roshan.
and we're your hosts.
This is the Wolfram Student Podcast, where every fortnight we dive into a new, innovative project done by high schoolers using the Wolfram language.
For our fourth episode, let's welcome Mansi Singh, who'll be discussing her project on finding trends in word changes across languages. Hello, Mansi.
Hey Sam, hey Rashank.
Great to have you on the podcast. So, could you tell us a bit about yourself? Like, your grade, your country, any details you might want to add?
I'm Mansi Singh. I'm from India, and I'm currently in 10th grade in India. That's like a sophomore in high school. And I've attended the middle school summer camp in like 2021, and the high school summer camp this year, as well as I'm attending WELP right now.
Cool. How was it like going from the middle school camp to the high school camp? Because I know it's quite different.
Yeah, the middle school camp we didn't really do projects, and it was like only for a week, whereas the high school camp was for longer, and we did do projects. So like, I believe we got to do something other than learning in the high school summer camp. So that was different, and it was nice to be honest in both of them. The school summer camp was like really enjoyable. The middle school camp was like a good introduction to coding and like the Wolfram language, whereas the high school camp, India high school camp, we actually got to do things and like with like WELP and like other things, like it basically increases the project time and like it's like more realistic in my opinion, which is why I guess it's fun too to work with other people. Whereas in right now, like in the WELP program, in like high school camp, it was like longer and we got to work on our like own things. So like we actually got to put to use whatever we learned in the actual camp. We got to do workshops in like the middle school camp, but like we did that in like the high school camp along with our projects. So it was definitely more we got to use our talents and like focus on like a project because like we had it specified to our interests, whereas in the middle school camp we just mainly learned how to use the language.
And just to kind of round off the intro, what was your favorite Wolfram function so far?
In I use the uh hmm, well I used the transliterate function in my project for the high school camp. It converts basically if you have a word in another language, it basically tells you its pronunciation in English. It was really fun to use, and it actually consisted a lot of the parts of my project. So yeah, that was fun to use.
Cool.
Cool. So let's get into your project. Can you give us like a quick summary of what your project is about?
Well, basically, when you have a word in English, when you translate it to other languages, it has different pronunciations and how it is written in the other languages. Let's say for computer, and if you convert it into the other languages, the letter the letter C changes to the letter K most likely. Is a common trend across the languages in word changes. So I basically made a project that basically found out what were the most common trend changes other for like all the words. I mean, like if you inputted a word by the user.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting project. But before we get into it, can you explain what these word changes or these word trends consist of for our listeners?
Words of different languages have like different pronunciations and structures for like the same word in English. So like sometimes the words change to form entirely new words. Like for fish, it forms poisson in like French, whereas like it doesn't have that much of a change in German. So like uh sometimes it forms into entirely new words, times it only a small part of them changes. So the changes or the lack of changes may occur due to like exposure of the language of one place to the language of another place. Like to be honest, there are a lot of reasons for like the changes. I actually for like some part of like during the start of the high school camp, I actually read a bit about it. Like most of like the websites actually said that the reasoning behind it is that like exposure of one community to another community. So basically the changes or like the lack of changes depend on basically how much one place has been exposed to another place. So, like, the exposure can have a lot of reasons, and it may be like prolonged exposure or like only for like some period. So, like, basically, a structure of language depends on a lot of things. The exposure may be like for like because they both the communities live like extremely close to one another, or um, because one country was a colony previously. There can be a lot of reasons, but in the end, it's basically leads to an exchange of words, and like this exchange of word leads to there being similar words across languages for like the same things. Like well, for India, like how I've seen things, I guess is like for the word pajamas, it's like I guess like I've heard like it's used like in British English as well, and like in India as well, in Hindi, I guess. And like the word jungle, it's like some things are like due to communities interacting, and the exposure then affects the language. So yeah, um, those are usually the reasons due to which there are like word changes across languages. So like I thought like maybe I could like basically see how much of it is true, and if it is affected by time as well, you know, because like maybe well like all of these things can only be like proved if you've like actually seen it for a longer period, or like you know meaning basically you worked on like worked to put the data together and stuff. But like yeah, so like how time affects it, like for older words maybe like it has a different um word for like each word, like fish in like different languages, whereas like for newer words like cars or like computers or like the internet, it will like most likely have like the same word because like it's newer and like the technology is like similar. But like then again, this might not be true um because like basically I don't think it's been like entirely proven because that's a lot of data to use. But like I believe like that's like a lot of the reasons that like the websites have said, and like it factors in like the distance thing as well. So yeah, I think that's like that might be how it worked, but like we would need to work with like the language data for longer to like actually piece it together whether that is how it works, I guess. Yeah.
Sounds pretty cool. Why don't you take us through it?
All right. So to start off, I basically use the word translation function to see. Let's take the word fish. So if we convert it from English to all languages, I basically made a word cloud of it so that it is like more fun to see, I guess. So like these are translations of the word fish in other languages. All right. So then basically I selected a few languages because if we have more languages, it would be like I would have to program it more. So like I selected a few languages so that I can focus on these. Then basically it gave more, let's say for a word, there are more than one translation in other languages. Like there is more than one for each, there is more translations for each word. Like how in Hindi there's machli and machli pakarna, and it basically means like it gives the action as well as the other things. So like if you enter a word, it should basically give the first part. So I used the take function to get the first word so that we can only have like one change. I mean, one word so that we can figure out the changes. But that would be a problem because that came out in a list, and basically Wolfram didn't allow that. So I used the part function, and that way and then I used the transliterate function, which I talked about earlier, to translate it into basically an English pronunciation. This way, we can have all the different words from different languages into a common way to judge them, basically. So I got the different words across all the languages. Then I found all the characters for like word that was inputted by the user. That and then I deleted the words of the main word from basically what the translation was.
Well, I guess when you were doing this translation, were there like, or especially with transliterate, were there any things that like got lost in translation, so to speak? Like for example, Chinese has tones. So were there like any other features that kind of got lost during translation?
I think like it's pretty accurate in like the translation it gives out, because in the end it's like a translation, it's it's a transliteration in like the English letters, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to compare it to the to across all languages. So it's basically a pronunciation that is the most accurate as it can be, basically. So um, let's say for like the word for fish in German is um, it's fish, like with a C. So if we remove the letters fish from the German translation, it we are only left with C. So that's the most common change for like that word. Um, I basically made a function that allowed the user to enter a string of like basically a word, and then I had the translation literation in like the English alphabets, and then I had the the translation of the other words as well in all the 10 languages. And I basically removed the English letters of the main word that was entered by the user from it. So like if we had fish, we had all the words removed from the word in like the translations. So then I had all the different letters that were left after we removed the fish characters from all the different words, and I made a list of that. So after I had a list of that, I basically counted of how many characters were there, and basically how many of each character from the English alphabet were there. So I arranged it in like basically the alphabetical order so it would be easier to use, and then I made a bar graph so it would be easier to see what the most common trend was. So in like with the letter fish, fish, if we remove that, there's most likely a is the most likely change in other words. Um, so that it has a, whereas in English, fish doesn't have any. Yeah, that was the change. And we can use this on other words as well. So yeah,
Okay, great. And do you want to talk about the graph a bit more? Just detail what sort of led you to presenting the information in this way, perhaps, and kind of
yeah.
explain what it's representing.
I actually thought of representing it in different ways, but I thought like a bar chart is like a simpler way of representing it. It doesn't always need to be like complex. I was originally thinking of doing it on like a world map, but like that wasn't really very practical in for this sort of project. So like I decided to do a bar chart in the end because it was like more practical and like it showed what I wanted it to show without being like confusing. And like I think with this project, like if we use it like more if we use like different words, I believe like through time it can basically if we um for like some words such as fish or some words such as computer, I've seen that like there are fewer changes for like um newer words, whereas there are like more changes for the older words. So like I think that can be used to see how old the words are, that like basically how it affects the changes across words. Hmm.
Cool. And is there a way to use this to predict changes for like different words? Like, could you say that if you like looked at the word for car, could you use the same thing to predict that there might be like more letters or more A's in the translation of car? Or yeah.
I believe like with vowels, there's a is like the most likely vowel there is. So like in the English word where there isn't an a, there's like if there isn't a vowel in the English word, it's like the most likely change across the other languages is like a vowel, because let's see for like o is first a is the most likely word for fish, where an o and like the other ones as well. So like um vowels are like the most I've seen like the common changes, I guess, like if a letter doesn't have them in like the English word, I guess. Hmm.
So, what was your most favorite part to code, and were there any parts that stood out as particularly challenging?
Well, my most favorite part would definitely be the translations and working with them. Like it was a fun bit of general knowledge, I guess, finding all the different translations for each word, because I didn't really know like what each word was called in different languages. So it was fun finding them out, I guess. And I guess like the most difficult part would be like um uh making the functions work, because like I got confused in like finding all of these different like basically functions I used, like transliterate. I didn't know that it existed, so like I had to do some digging before I found that out. And like lists, and like how some basically functions didn't work on lists, so I had to make it a string and other parts of that. But like the general concept of the project was like more fun to do rather than like the functions of it.
Cool. So I guess coming back to like the Wolfram language, like what are your thoughts about it? Have you enjoyed using the Wolfram language so far? Is there anything that you think would be better to code with?
It's definitely fun to use because it's easier and like simpler than like the other languages I've used. It's more it like does a lot of stuff on its own because like in other languages I don't think like I've I've seen this many functions used so far, like with how much coding I've done. So like it it's pretty visualizing as well. Like it has a lot of like visual stuff. So like it's fun to use in my opinion.
Cool. So, I guess another question I kind of had, maybe moving a bit towards the end. Do you feel like, the knowledge of linguistics you've learned throughout this project, do you feel like you're looking forward to applying those in other ways? Or was this sort of more of a tangential exploration of an interest, which is obviously, just as perfectly fine?
Well, I've like participated in like linguistics Olympiads and like other things. So like I think this is pretty related to like identifying things across languages, and like my project was actually based on that. So like I think if I ever like participate more in linguistics, I think like the changes and stuff like it would help. And like if I'm learning new languages, I believe what we as people when learning new languages do is like basically see the changes in like words across languages. So I believe this project was similar to that too. And like if I participate in like competitions or Olympiads regarding linguistics, I believe this would be relevant there if like in like human reasoning as well. Hmm.
Cool. And I guess just one last question. What's or is there any future work that you'd like to do with this project, or some like more in-depth results that you want to try to get, or just in general with the Wolfram language? What would you like to do next?
Well, with this project, I was actually originally planning to have it basically see how like the word changes are affected by like distance as well. Um, and that's why I was planning on making it on like a world map or something, like having a visualization of the project on there. But like in the end, like there wasn't enough like time for me to do that, so like I decided not to. So like I if I ever do more with this project, I believe like I would like um basically make some changes so that I can see how like word changes are like affected by like ground distance. Yeah. And like I believe more future projects that with Wolfram I'm doing are like currently we are planning our Whelp project. So like I believe that like I we're currently deciding, me and my group, that most likely gonna do a project that has like some linguistics in it as well. And like I believe some of the logic that I used here can be like applied in like the project we're deciding as well.
Hmm. Sounds great. Well, best of luck on your Belt project, and thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure learning about you and your project. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Wolfram Student Podcast. We hope you learned something new and took away insights from today's discussion. If you want to be featured in a future episode, fill out the form at tinyurl.com/wsp-interest-form. Thank you for listening.
And be sure to tune in 2 weeks' time when we'll be discussing with Anthony Lee about whether planes near airports tend to fly over green space. Once again, thanks for listening.